Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and we're lifelong Catholics. And what we do is all for free, and for the love of Jesus Christ, and for our Holy Mother, the Church. And we'll defend our Holy Mother, the Church. Today we're going to be talking about the announcement of Pope Francis about adding the Coptic Martyrs that were beheaded under ISIS to the Roman Martyrology. And welcome Brother Alexis to the program.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. It's always a pleasure to be on this new Catholic apostolate that breaks all the rules on what can be discussed, and where uncontrolled opposition in the true sense, we get funding from no one but our audience. So I would remind you, if you like this program, think of making a donation to the Order Militaris Studio Fund so that we can grow our services. Unlike other organizations, we are not raising hundreds of thousands of dollars each year for our personal use. We've only raised $2,000 in 4 years. So, and it's gone into an escrow fund for the studio. So let us begin. So this is rather a controversial announcement. Well, a lot of things that Pope Francis has said has been controversial, but here we're going to discuss, is it really so? So the first thing, if you don't know, the Martyrology is a list of all the saints and martyrs that the Church recognizes are in heaven. And it's an ancient book, and it's normally was read at the office of Prime before the Council, and it is nowadays not read at all, although it is still a publication. And the saints in that are Catholic saints. Who are these Coptic martyrs, and what does all this have to do? I'll preface the fact that Pope Francis made this statement during the visit of Pope Tewodros III, I believe, to Rome. Now, Pope Tewodros is the Patriarch of the Coptic Church, and he's called Pope. So, and there are people called Pope other than the Roman Pontiff. And he was on a trip to Rome for promote the unity of the two churches again, because the Church of Alexandria is founded by Saint Mark, the secretary of Saint Peter, so the churches were once very, very close. And during this visit, Pope Tewodros was allowed to celebrate the Divine Liturgy at St. John Lateran. And Francis made this promise that had the 21 martyrs killed under ISIS to the Roman Martyrology. So that's just a brief introduction. For most of the people in the West, you probably remember this story of the men dressed in orange jumpsuits who had their heads blown out on the beaches of Libya. But AJ, why don't you review that for those who don't know the details? How did it come to happen, what happened, and what was the aftermath?
Okay. On February 12, 2015, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant released a report in their online magazine, Tabligh, showing photos of 21 Egyptian Christians, construction workers that they had kidnapped in the city of Sirte, Libya, all in whom they threatened to kill. The men who came from different villages in Egypt, 13 of them from Al-Armenia Governorate, were kidnapped in Sirte in two separate attacks on 27 December 2014 and January 2015. A video was subsequently released showing their murder. This was not the first time the Egyptians in Libya had been subject of abuse for political reasons, a pattern that goes back to the 1960s. Okay, so on February 15, 2015, a 5-minute video was published showing the beheading of the captives on the beach along the southern Mediterranean coast. A caption in the video called "The Captives, the People of the Cross, Followers of the Hostile Egyptian Church." In the video, the leader was dressed in camouflage, while the other terrorists were dressed in black. The victims were all dressed in orange jumpsuits, as in many previous ISIS videos. The leader declared in North American English, "O people, recently you have seen us in the hills of Al-Sham and on Dabiq's plain, chopping off the heads that had been carrying the cross, delusion for a long time, filled with spite against Islam and Muslims, and today we are sending another message. O Crusaders, safety for you will be only wishes, especially when you're fighting us all together. Therefore we fight you all together until the war lays down its burdens, and Jesus, peace be upon them, will descend, breaking the cross, killing the swine. The sea you've hidden Sharik al-Osama bin Laden's body in. We swear to Allah we will mix it with your blood. So, man who did that was either from Canada or America who said that.
Okay. So what was the aftermath? Did this murder obviously took place, but were the bodies discovered? Was there investigation? Was anyone arrested?
Um, so, when they were being beheaded, the martyr said, Ya Rabba Yeshua, O Lord Jesus. And then they were gave a chance to convert to Islam, but they had refused. And they died saying the holy name of Jesus. So, later when one of the perpetrators of the operation was arrested, he admitted in the investigation that slaughter had taken place at the beach opposite Al Mari Hotel in Sarit. The president of Egypt, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, announced a 7-day period of national mourning and called for an urgent meeting with the country's top security body. In a televised address, al-Sisi declared his country reserved the right for retaliation. He also reiterated an offer to facilitate Egyptians' evacuation from Libya and impose a travel ban on citizens to Libya. Al-Hazar also condemned the incident. The killings were also addressed particularly by the United Nations Security Council, French President François Hollande, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Pope Francis telephoned Pope Tadros II to offer his condolence. At an ecumenical meeting with the moderators of the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland, Pope Francis stated that they only said, Jesus, help me. The blood of our Christian brothers is a testimony that cries out. Be they Catholic, Orthodox, Copts, Lutherans, it doesn't matter. You're Christian. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Hungary provided financial support of £500 for each family of the victims. The Obama administration was criticized, referring to the victims simply as Egyptian citizens rather than Christians. The express reason for their murder.
Where their bodies were covered.
Yep. On as the explosions of fighters of the Islamic State organization from the Libyan cities of Syria, government authorities announced they had found the place where the bodies of Coptic martyrs were buried. This was done after the government authorities and the Libyan army arrested one of the terrorists who was present during the slaughter. The Libyan Attorney General had ordered cooperation with the Egyptian authorities to send DNA samples taken from the families of the martyrs to be paired with the DNA samples taken from the remains of the martyrs. Then they were finally sent back to Egypt on May 15, 2018. All 20, in the body of the one from Ghana, Matthew Agriga, was not on the plane. So, yeah, they were all returned except the African.
who was eventually also returned. So the story of the African was that he was a Muslim, and then when he saw the faith of the Christians, they asked him if he too, or he, I guess maybe was a pagan, if he too would become a Muslim. He said, "No, my God is their God," and they cut his head off too. So this is a clear case of martyrdom. Martyrdom in the Catholic Church is defined as being killed out of hatred for the Christian faith. And it requires that you hold the Catholic faith and that you are given the chance to give up your faith, or demanded that you've given up your faith, and you refuse, and you are put to death accordingly. If you're a schismatic or heretic, the church won't regard you as a martyr. So what Bergoglio said back in 2015 is theologically wrong. Not all Christians who are killed out of hatred of the faith are martyrs. Now, we here at Ordo Militaris Catholicus, we propose the defense of all Christians who are hated for the name of Jesus Christ, whether they're martyrs or not, because we're not an organization that seeks to evangelize or teach the faith. Not our purpose. Our purpose is merely physical security. So we don't get into discussion of martyrs to speak on a theological level, but on this show we're going to, because something that Pope Francis has said in May of 2015 and May of 2023, and so this is an important point. So there is a big brouhaha over this statement to add these men to the list of martyrs in the Roman Catholic Church, or I'd say in the Catholic Church. And I think one of the chief proponents is Louis Verrecchio, and he has a page on that, and AJ will put that in the show notes. You want to read something from his article or do a summary of it? What's his final conclusion? Or
yeah,
he's red hot mad about this.
See if I can find his ending of it here. So, get this paragraph here. When Aginta states that the blood of Christians was like a seed, therefore this is council speak for heretic martyrs. Fast forward 6 decades, when Francis says that 21 schismatic heretic Copts, these martyrs were baptized not only in water and spirit. He's looking at them with considerate eyes as members of Christ's body, who were killed for their faith. If this be so, then their blood may rightly be considered, according to the conciliar view, as a seed for the one church, i.e., they are true martyrs, their blood seeds of unity. Outrageous? Yeah, sort of, but you won't find me running around complaining about it with my hair on fire after all. The 21 Copts aren't the first non-Catholic to make it into the Roman Martyrology on Jorge's watch.
Okay, so his objection is a theological one. Now we're going to discuss the history of the Coptic Church. What is the Coptic Church? And then how is it that there is a Coptic Church and a Catholic Church, and that for centuries we were not in communion? And what's the cause of that? So this is what's underlying the misunderstanding of Louis Verrecchio, who's a rather good apologist, but as far as I know, doesn't have a degree in theology and doesn't know its history of the church too well. So first, AJ, what is the Coptic Church? What does that name refer to? What country do they live in? How many are they? And so, tell us something about them.
Yeah. The Egyptian church was founded by Mark the Evangelist around 42 AD. It regards itself as the subject of many prophecies in the Old Testament. The first Christians in Egypt were common people who spoke Egyptian Coptic. There were also Alexandrian Jewish people such as Theophilus, the same name addressed in the introductory chapter of the Gospel of Luke, though it is unclear who the author refers to. When the church was founded during the reign of the Roman Emperor Nero, a great multitude of native Egyptians, as opposed to Greeks or Jews, embraced the Christian faith. Now, the Coptic language is the universal language used in Coptic churches in everyday country. It descends from the ancient Egyptian and uses the Coptic alphabet. A script descended from the Greek alphabet with added characters derived from the Demotic script. Today, Coptic is used primarily for liturgical purposes. Many of the hymns in the liturgy are Coptic and have been passed down for several thousand years. The language is used to preserve Egypt's original language, which was banned by the Arab invaders, who ordered Arabic to be used instead. However, most Coptics speak Arabic, the official language of Egypt. Its Arabic is also used in church services nowadays. The service books, though written in Coptic, have the Arabic text in parallel columns.
Okay, so the Coptic Church is an apostolic church. It was founded by one of the apostles, Mark the Evangelist, and that means it has apostolic succession. According to the Roman tradition, it was St. Peter who sent Mark to Alexandria to preach the faith. So that means they have valid sacraments, the 7 sacraments that we have, whether they number them as 7 or not, they have them. And that means they have valid masses. And Jesus is present in their tabernacle, so you understand what the Coptics are. So they are not a Greek rite of the church, but they are an Eastern rite of the church. You shouldn't call them a Byzantine rite, although they were once part of the Byzantine Empire. Now, this is where the problem goes along. So the Copts accepted all the ecumenical councils up to the 4th. It was the 5th that caused the problems. The 4th was one of the great ecumenical councils of the church. It was held at Ephesus, and the Patriarch of Alexandria was charged by the Roman Pontiff to lead the council in his name, and he was the representative of the Roman Pontiff at Ephesus. And at Ephesus, they defined Our Lady as Mother of God, that the child she gave birth is truly the eternal Son of the Father. And the Copts just went like, crazy about that. That's one of their great councils. They'll always talk about Ephesus, and they have a great devotion to Mary, Mother of God. So much so that Our Lady's even in recent times even appeared over their churches and seen by everyone, Copts and non-Copts alike. But it was the 5th council. So at the 5th council, what happened, AJ, and why did they reject it? Then I'll explain the misunderstanding. We're talking about the Council of Chalcedon.
Yeah, so.
No, Chalcedon.
So some believe the monophysitism or one nature of Christ. And they even believe the Greek where it says, Mia physis theo logu, sis of comini, one incarnate nature of God, the Word. But then when it was brought up that they would say two natures, it was like,
Yeah, so at the Council of Chalcedon, which is the 5th ecumenical council accepted by the Church of Rome and all the churches of the East, pretty much, except maybe I think the Nestorians and Patriarch of Antioch, the ancient one, didn't accept it. It was defined that in the one person of the divine Son, there are now 2 natures, human and divine, perfect and yet united in his person, so that from all eternity, he was the divine Son with a divine nature, but in his incarnation of the Virgin by the Holy Spirit, he took upon himself, or he took possession as his own, a human nature, which is now united forever with his divine person. And the phrase was 2 natures in the one person of the Godhead. And that's the Catholic doctrine. And the Coptic Church today agrees that that's not heretical, but in the 6th century, a problem arose because at the earlier council of Ephesus, most of the bishops of Egypt still spoke Greek and were of Greek culture. But a century later at the Council of Chalcedon, that was not the case. They spoke Coptic and they had poor comprehension of the Greek. When we add to the fact that the Greeks fathers of the church did not use philosophical terms according to the Greek etymology, but with different meanings, it caused a lot of confusion in the ancient church. We Romans never got confused because our whole culture was based on Greek culture, so we're experts in Greek and translating Greek terms into Latin. That only lasted until about the 8th or 9th century, then we forgot Greek too. So it all boils down to two Greek words, physis and hypostasis. So physis, the correct translation is nature. It comes from the Greek word meaning to grow. However, in common parlance in ancient times, the word also meant being. Okay. Then there's the Greek word hypostasis. Greek doesn't have a word for person. Person was coined by a Latin father of the church, Lactantius, who was an expert in Roman law, and it signified someone who was legally responsible. Your hand is not a person, it's not legally responsible. You are, okay? Your head's not responsible. Your foot's, no part of you is responsible. The whole of you is responsible, and that's your person. So we Latins have had a lot easier time understanding the Trinity, the three divine persons in the one nature, because we distinguish between personhood and nature. The Greeks, fathers of the church, use hypostases, which doesn't mean person. Etymologically, it means substance. Hypostasis is what stands under something. So if you understand that word as substance, you're not going to understand what the Greek fathers are saying, and big misunderstandings can take place. So at Chalcedon, when the fathers of the church defined as infallible a dogma of the faith that in Christ there are two natures, one divine and one human, in the one person, in Greek they said two physis in the one divine hypostasis. And this made the heads of the Copts blow open because they didn't understand physis and hypostasis in the same sense. They thought Chalcedon was teaching the two beings in the one divine substance, which is heresy, because by the incarnation, the human nature doesn't get mixed in with the divine nature. God doesn't change in the incarnation, okay? So this is an important thing. God doesn't change. He comes down, he assumes, but he doesn't change. His divine person acquires a new nature as an internal possession, but he doesn't, and thus we can say in a transferred sense, he becomes man, but he does not become a human. And this is the key phrase that most, even modern theologians don't understand, especially if they come from languages that don't have the definite and indefinite article. English does, and so we can be very precise. Some of the Western languages have that. Greek does it in a different way, but still so. I don't think Coptic has articles, so this could be a problem. So there was this misunderstanding. The Copts were totally scandalized by Chalcedon, and they called their own council, and they defined that there was one nature in the incarnate God, Jesus Christ. They use the word physis, one being of the incarnate God, Jesus Christ, by which it's obvious what they're trying to say is there's one divine person, and that there is no there's no two of him, there's one of him, and that's perfectly Catholic. But it's using the Greek terms in their etymologic sense and not in the traditional theologic sense that Chalcedon used. Did the Copts understand that in the 6th century? No, they didn't. Did the Greeks understand that in the 16th century? No, both sides didn't understand that, and they beat each other over the head. And the emperor of Constantinople viciously persecuted the Copts. They tried to reconcile with them, and he sowed a lot of bad blood. And so the Coptic Church went into de facto schism for centuries. But recently, in the last 60 years, the Catholic theologians have sat down with the Coptic theologians and understanding that Greek words were not used correctly by the Greek fathers, have come to the understanding that what they're saying is not heretical and what we're saying is not heretical. We both agree we're not heretics. And that's why Pope Francis recently asked Pope Tohidros to celebrate the Divine Liturgy in the Basilica of St. John Lateran, although Pope Francis didn't attend it, nor did any Catholic clergy or Catholic faithful attend it, okay? So it's not yet communion in sacris, and that sharing of the sacraments, but it looks like in our lifetimes that will take place because the Copts have come to understand that they misunderstood. And we have come to understand that we misunderstood. because we were both using a language, Greek, that we're not experts in, neither the Copts nor the Romans. And the Greeks, well, the Greeks want everyone to understand the Greek the way they do, but not everyone understands Greek the way they do. And if you're a native English speaker from Britain or the United States, and you go to places like Kenya, South Africa, or India, you're going to find English speakers who think they know English, but don't use English the way you think it should be used. And this can lead to misunderstandings. I was recently in London, and I had to ask some native speakers of English. Well, they were native, but they weren't of British descent, what they meant by what they were saying, because it wasn't clear to me, though I'm a native speaker of English, American English, they'll say. So is this formal schism? No. Is this heresy? No. Is it true that in the course of, what, 14 centuries, 15 centuries, they might have not paid any attention to the theological developments in the West and the Catholic Church, while our other ecumenical councils, you can be sure they didn't pay attention to them. First of all, they're in a language they didn't read, and they felt that they were in schism. So are they formal heretics? And here we get down to St. Alphonsus de Liguori, doctor of the church, who's more authoritative than Lou Verrecchio or any traddy out there, anyone you see on YouTube. He's even more authoritative than me and AJ, okay? Than I and AJ are, I should say. And as a doctor of the church, he taught that schism is the sin of those who go into schism, and heresy is the sin of those who taught heresy. But schism and heresy are not always the sins of the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. And when St. Alphonsus sent his missionaries to Germany to convert Protestants to Catholicism, he expressly told them, do not regard the Protestants as heretics, formal heretics, or formal schismatics, but teach them the basics of the faith, and if they understand the basics, you should consider them to have goodwill. You might not be able to get to transubstantiation in the first year of catechesis because they've been taught all kinds of lies about it. But that doesn't mean they're formal heretics, such that they've been misled. Okay. So is it possible then to name these 21 martyrs as martyrs of the Catholic Church? Can we say that these individuals were heretics or schismatics? No, we cannot say they're possible. So can Pope Francis add them to the Roman Martyrology? Yes, he can. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. And unless there's some positive proof that they were personally heretics, none of these guys were theologians. They probably never studied any of the theologic differences. These are just common working dads. They probably went to Libya just to get enough money to feed their families. They probably had only gone to liturgy in the Coptic Church. They probably didn't know a word of English or Latin or any history of the church. So they personally were not guilty of any sin of schism or of a heresy. So can they be martyrs? Yes. And are they in heaven? I tend to think it would be hard to deny that they're in heaven because they died as martyrs. But you know, that's for the church to decide if Pope Francis should canonize them or actually add them to the Martyrology. He has not yet added them to the Martyrology. He said he wants to. Okay, so we're not talking about something the Pope has done, just something, opinion he has expressed. Mm-hmm. So now we'll name the martyrs, and as it's only fitting their names. Then we'll talk about who perpetrated this act and who was behind it, since this is also part of the story. So the names of these 21 martyrs are Bishoy Adel Khalaf, Melad Mekin Zaki, Youssef Shokri Yunan, Somali Stefanos Kamel, Mena Fayez Aziz, Essam Badir Samir, Malak Faraj Abram, Samuel Aloam Wilson, Abanub Ayad Attila, Kyrillos Shukri Fazwi, Malak Ibrahim Siniot, Grigis Melad Siniot, Luke Nagati, Samel Salah Farouk, Hani Abel Mashis Salib, Ezat Bushra Nasif, Majid Suleiman Shehata, Bishoy Stefanos Kamel, Twadros Youssef Tawadros, Jabir Munir Adli, and the Ghanan Matthew Agariga. And you might notice from those names some English names because Egypt was under English rule for a long time. And you might notice some Arabic names because generally speaking, Christians in the East, in Arab countries, will give Arab names to their kids to keep them from being persecuted in school. So those are the names of the martyrs. AJ, what was the organization that killed them? And now, in the present 2023, who do we know backed and armed these people?
Well, it says the Islamic State, but we now know, thanks to WikiLeaks and other research, the CIA is ISIS, and they funded them, trained them, armed them.
Mm-hmm. And you know for a fact that it was the MI5 was also involved from England. You know for a fact that these people aren't from the Mideast because the voice in the video was a North American voice. So he's obviously a CIA agent, or maybe he's a Canadian intel. He's not someone from the Mideast. You hear, if you've ever met anyone from Egypt try to speak English, as I have done with the flower sellers at Rome, who are Christians, they have a really heavy accent. They're not faking any American accent. Matter of fact, if they can speak American English well, they go to America and get a job. They don't stay in Europe or in Africa. So if anyone is going around shooting as a terrorist in Libya and speaks perfect English, he must be paid a salary much better than you would get in Libya. Okay. So other facts of this case is, hey, do you remember the attack on the American consulate there in Libya? That took place in what year was that? That was like that was earlier. That was like what, 2011, 2012. I was in Noto, Sicily, right across in Sicily that year, and that attack was, according to experts today, was something that Obama allowed to happen because he asked his CIA-backed militias to kill the American consul who wanted to be ambassador, who knew Obama was funding and supplying these terrorists. And it was allowed to go down to cover up the loose ends. And so there's another way we know that the CIA was behind this, AJ, and what is that? It has to do with censorship of the image of these martyrs.
So the actual images, not the icons of the Coptic Church on this, but the actual images of their bodies and their heads separated. We tweeted that out, and your accounts got totally wiped out, but mine got wiped out quite a few times. And, yeah.
You can't even find a picture of them in the orange before their heads are chopped off. Even that image you couldn't tweet out. You know, it reminds me of the image of the dead shooter at the Allentown Mall. You can't tweet his image out either.
Mm-hmm.
What if that means he was a CIA agent?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you've got to remember that social media is a front for the deep state intelligence apparatus to understand what we're saying, what we're thinking, identify us, pigeonhole us, and watch us. That's the whole purpose of it, that and the cell phone and social media. So when an image is banned, it's because it irks them, okay? And it irks them in a way that you should pay attention to. So that's our report on the Coptic Martyrs. May they intercede for all Christians persecuted around the world. And simple men. They didn't argue over smells and bells in churches and things like that. They just went to work to get money for their families. Yet when it came to having their head chopped off, knowing that their family would never have anyone to support them again, that they would never see their wives or their children or their parents again, they didn't hesitate to refuse to convert to Islam. They remained Christians. And this is an outstanding testimony for our age. And I would dare say, if you took 20 men from any Catholic parish in North America or in the West, or 20 Latin Mass parishes in West, if you would get all 29 also to accept death rather than converting to Islam, I would dare say you'd find that courage. So let's not mock or criticize these people. I would dare say you, Lou Verrecchio, would stand that strong either. We don't know. Martyrdom is a grace. It's not something that comes from the force of will. And clearly God gave these men the grace of martyrdom. So thank you, AJ, for having me on this important program on the Coptic Martyrs of Libya.
Yep. This is Roman Martyrology Video TV signing off. That's all.
That's all.